Hello, I'm Michelle Powers, and you are watching a special edition of Currents News. The dig for survivors continues this weekend in Lebanon, and so does the search for answers. What caused the blast, and could it have been avoided? That's not the only disaster. A Catholic cathedral in Nicaragua destroyed after it was firebombed. The Vatican is calling for an investigation. Plus, we say goodbye to a man who never lost faith in peace, John Hume. And social media usually shows our best days, but for one teen, she lets it see her worst. Her confidence has made her famous. All that and more is next on Currents News, Special Edition. Lebanon's death toll still remains a mystery right now. So many people are missing. At least 150 have been reported dead and thousands more hurt. The Lebanese government is blaming the blast on explosives left to rot in a warehouse for years. Shockwaves are being felt in the Diocese of Brooklyn. Currents News' Jessica Easthope has that part of the story from Brooklyn Heights.
There were letters from people who were in charge to the government. Let's do something about these, explosive materials. And it seems that no one was able to do anything.
Father Dominique Hanna, the director of the Cathedral of Our Lady of Lebanon in Brooklyn Heights, feels helpless. On Tuesday, the explosion in the country's capital killed at least 100 people and injured thousands more. Though they were miles away from the blast in the Beirut suburbs, Father Hannah's sister and her 2 children had to run for their lives.
I heard my little niece saying, my mom took us and she ran. Uncle, you have to see, it was a huge big smoke and a mushroom kind of shape.
Father Hanna offered his morning mass Wednesday for the victims of the explosion and the people of Lebanon.
Our hometown, it's almost about 25 miles north, and the glass shattered there.
Devastated by the scenes of his country, Joseph El Khalasi took off from work Wednesday to attend Mass with his family. He says even those who didn't experience loss of life are now losing hope.
It's a devastating thing between the coronavirus, and there's a very bad economical situation going on out there, and adding insult to injuries.
The timing of the blast is devastating. Lebanon is struggling to contain the COVID-19 outbreak and is in the midst of an unprecedented economic crisis. Currently, 45% of the country lives below the poverty line. And Tuesday's blast has left more than 300,000 people homeless, creating a new financial burden for the country. Bishop Gregory Mansour of the Eparchy of St. Maron of Brooklyn says Lebanon will be reliant on the help of others.
The only way that they can survive is for the wealthy to open their hearts. The wealthy in the diaspora, the wealthy in the country, to open their hearts once again to assist the poor.
But Bishop Mansour says he has no doubt this horrific event will bring out the best in the Lebanese people.
They're all helping their families, but now they'll help different institutions. So in the midst of all this, this is Lebanon, the beauty of Lebanon.
Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
Our Lady of Lebanon is organizing both a prayer service and collection for the victims of the explosion. It will be held on Tuesday, August 25th at 7 o'clock at the church in Brooklyn Heights. All are invited to attend, but are asked to social distance. If you can't make that prayer service, you can still help. Go to www.caritas.org.lb. There you'll be able to make a donation. That's www.caritas.org.lb. Meanwhile, Amnesty International is demanding an independent investigation into the blast. The humanitarian organization wants to ensure the probe is free from any domestic political bias. They are calling for a worldwide group of investigators to be assembled. While the explosive ammonium nitrate stored unsafely in a warehouse could be the cause, Amnesty believes the world needs to know for certain. They argue that's the only way to ensure truth, justice, and reparations for the victims. Now, you might be wondering what exactly is ammonium nitrate. Well, scientifically speaking, it's the ammonium salt of nitric acid, and it's highly explosive. The material is used in fertilizer and to produce explosives such as bombs. It can explode by adding energy such as heat or shock, especially when contaminants are present. Lebanese officials knew for 6 years that thousands of tons of that volatile material were stored at the port, but didn't act to remove it or make it safe. Records show that Lebanese custom officials wrote letters to the courts at least 6 times from 2014 to 2017, seeking guidance on how to dispose of that highly combustible material. Ben Wiedemann has been on the ground in Lebanon covering the aftermath. He has more on the government's rebuilding plans, or lack of them, from the site of the blast.
Less than 24 hours after that massive explosion went off in Beirut port on Tuesday evening, just after 6 p.m., the city is a scene of destruction. In fact, the government has declared Beirut as a disaster zone. According to the health ministry, at least 100 people were killed, more than 4,000 wounded. Several 100,000 people have been made homeless as a result of this explosion. You can just see behind me the extent of the destruction in this area, which is not far from Beirut port. Almost every window was shattered. Cars have been damaged. The police have been going around trying to make a record of all the destruction that has taken place. The government is allocated millions of dollars to try to rebuild this city, but the problem Lebanon has is that the government is bankrupt. The economy is in free fall, and Lebanon's traditional donors have essentially abandoned it. So it really has come down to ordinary people doing what they can to help clean up the mess. We've seen volunteers going around handing out water and sandwiches. The president of Lebanon has promised that a transparent investigation will be conducted into what happened on Tuesday evening about that explosion. But at this point, many people are so angry with the government that has for decades mismanaged this country. There's little faith that that investigation will come up with real answers to what happened in Beirut. I'm Ben Wiedemann, reporting from Beirut, Lebanon.
The people of Lebanon are not far from the Holy Father's thoughts. Pope Francis is keeping them in his prayers every night.
Ieri a Beirut, nella zona del porto, delle fortissime esplosioni hanno causato decine di morti e migliaia di feriti e molte gravi distruzioni. Preghiamo per le vittime e per i loro familiari.
Francis also urged the international community to devote any and all resources they can to help the country off its knees. Still to come, the Vatican calls for an investigation. They want to know why a cathedral in Nicaragua was firebombed. Plus Pope Benedict's health, the world is watching. We've got the latest update, and human trafficking. It's on the rise worldwide and on New York streets. The Vatican has a demand this weekend that the firebombing of the cathedral in Nicaragua be investigated as arson. The faithful have been heartbroken over the attack last week. Nicaragua's vice president is blaming church candles for the blaze. The Holy See is not buying that as the cause of the fire inside the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception in Managua. Witnesses reported seeing a Molotov cocktail being thrown into the church. A nearly 400-year-old crucifix of Christ was heavily damaged. Pope Francis has condemned the attack.
Cari fratelli nicaraguense, vi sono vicino e prego per voi.
Francis said the damaged Christ crucifix was highly venerated and sustained the life of the faithful for centuries. Tensions between Catholics and the regime of Nicaragua's ruler Daniel Ortega have been high. Ortega accusing many bishops and priests of siding with his opponents of his government. Backers of the regime have attacked several churches, including the cathedral, when critics of Ortega took refuge there. Talk of Benedict XVI's health is also swirling at the Vatican. A German newspaper sparked a scare over his well-being when they published a story claiming the retired pontiff was seriously ill. Current News' Emily Druby tells us the Vatican and Benedict's personal secretary are now pushing back against that claim.
The Vatican responding to the declarations made by the Pope Emeritus biographer Peter Seewald, who claimed Benedict XVI was seriously ill and extremely fragile. The Holy See's spokesperson Matteo Bruni and Benedict XVI's personal secretary Monsignor Gregor Gainswine both saying the health conditions of the Pope Emeritus are not that worrying. Pope Benedict XVI has been suffering for weeks from an infection, which especially affects the skin on his face. It has been causing him pain, itchiness, and fever. He has been receiving antibiotics. The Vatican says his health reflects that of a 93-year-old who is going through the most difficult part of a painful but not critical illness. Seewald visited the Pope Emeritus to present him with a biography he'd written about him. After their meeting, Seewald told a German paper that Benedict XVI was ill, that he was barely audible, and he was extremely fragile, although he was in good spirits.
Emily Druby, Currents News.
Meanwhile, the world did have to say goodbye to another peacemaker this week. The Irish Catholic politician John Hume passed away. He devoted his life to ending the troubles and decades of bloodshed in his Northern Ireland homeland. Currents News' Jessica Easthope has reaction from the Diocese of Brooklyn.
He really did believe in the words of Jesus Christ, and I think that carried him a long way.
For decades, John Hume was a voice of peace throughout Ireland.
Breaking down the barriers that divide our people.
The echoes of his calls for unity were heard across the world and still are here in the Brooklyn Diocese.
He was very big into nonviolence, and that was a tough road to take back then because that part of the world became extremely polarized.
Gerard McCabe, the chairman of IABS Charities Inc., a nonprofit supporting Irish organizations, knew Hume personally. He says Hume was every bit the peacemaker the world saw him to be.
He was a teacher before he became a politician, and he was extremely articulate and very bright, and he knew his history, and just a good conversation.
1 out of 500 people have lost their lives. 1 out of 50 people have been maimed or injured.
The Nobel laureate received the Peace Prize for his painstaking efforts to bring harmony to the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. The two territories were in the midst of a decades-long conflict. Hume's peace negotiations, known as the Good Friday Agreement, ended the bloodshed.
He decided to speak to Gerry Adams, sit down with Gerry Adams, and he convinced the other side that they have to sit down with Gerry Adams too, because he was the voice of the majority of the Irish Catholics.
For agreement and for peace and stability.
Father Christopher Henue, the head of the Irish Apostolate for the Brooklyn Diocese, said he knows Hume's faith guided him throughout his life and political career.
I'd attribute some of that desire to work for the common good, that desire to work toward unity, toward peace, toward harmony, as being a part of his call, of all of our calls as Catholics.
McCabe says now, as the world once again finds itself becoming more and more divided, we could use someone like John Hume.
John Hume certainly provided the paradigm for an environment where people can come together and voice their differences, and at the end of the day, find some common ground.
When it was most unpopular to be middle of the road, John Hume walked that tough path. His legacy will forever be peace. Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
The world is facing a humanitarian crisis that's growing worse. It's not only COVID-19. The evil of human trafficking is accelerating because of the coronavirus pandemic. The Catholic relief agency Caritas says the traffickers are now preying on people who have lost jobs or homes during the outbreak. Currents News' Emily Druby tells us victims are at risk around the globe and here in New York.
As billions of people shuttered their doors to avoid COVID-19, another virus was growing.
Human trafficking and exploitation is increasing during pandemic.
This warning released by the International Catholic Relief Organization, Caritas.
Already, human trafficking victims are exploited because of vulnerabilities, and situations like pandemic just exacerbate those vulnerabilities.
Tori Curbello works for Lifeway Network, a Brooklyn and Queens-based group that fights human trafficking by providing housing for victims and education for the public. She says the U.S. has also seen an increase in crisis trafficking situations, up 40% after shelter-in-place orders were started. These numbers pulled from the U.S. trafficking hotline.
All the attention to this pandemic diverted somehow government and institutions' attention on other, we can call it collateral damages.
As Marta Petrocio with Caritas explains, that includes migrant workers, many of them undocumented, children experiencing violence and forced labor, and victims being trafficked for sexual exploitation. There's a lot of reasons for the surge: housing and job instability, a lack of freedom and ability to get out of a bad situation because of the lockdown and travel restrictions, and an increase in online child exploitation as children and predators use the internet more. A lack of access to resources is also to blame. Curbelo says not feeling supported can make victims put off getting help.
Accessing that help is really difficult for some people to take that step. At any point, they can change their mind.
So how can we deal with this plague? Caritas is calling on governments to provide victims with access to shelters, hotlines, and to put measures into place that can support workers in informal sectors. Individuals can help too by keeping their eyes open.
There will never be, of course, as you may know, a sign that says human trafficking is going on here, but there's certainly dynamics that should make us feel uncomfortable.
Signs of trouble include living with an employer, being unable to speak with the person alone, scripted or rehearsed answers, acting submissive or fearful, and an employer holding a victim's identity documents.
And building relationships with people that we encounter, from coffee shops to the grocery store, and getting to know their names, their situations, that can be mighty helpful as well.
Emily Druby, Currents News.
It is estimated that 40 million people are trafficked every year, but only a small percentage of traffickers ever face prosecution. If you or someone you know is a victim of human trafficking and needs help, call the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 888-373-7888 or visit their website humantraffickinghotline.org. Don't walk away. Inspiration you won't want to miss. A teen battling cancer with confidence. It's contagious and it's made her famous. Plus, the reason Father Michael McGivney is one step closer to becoming a saint. Meet the miracle. A Catholic high school student is a viral inspiration. The Staten Island teenager is using the widely popular TikTok app, and she's lifting spirits and providing hope during this pandemic while fighting the biggest battle of her life. Currents News' Jessica Easthope has the story.
First time getting chemo check.
TikTok, it's the social media platform that skyrocketed into popularity, especially among many of the world's teenagers.
A lot of you guys have followed me since my first chemo.
So it was only natural for 16-year-old Isabella Orsini to use the platform's viral dances and funny voiceovers to document her life.
So starting tomorrow, I'm halfway done with chemo.
Even when she began to live through the unimaginable.
At first, I didn't even know what lymphoma was. I was so confused on why my parents were so upset.
Belle, as she's known to her family and friends, was diagnosed with cancer, Hodgkin's lymphoma, in February, a month after her sweet 16.
It was horrible.
Her mom, Tracy, was living every parent's nightmare.
You wish no one ever has to go through.
But Belle was taking her diagnosis in stride and putting everyone around her at ease.
And she made it easier on everybody because she made light of it.
This is a day of chemo.
She began chemotherapy at the height of the pandemic and was pulled out of St. Joseph Hill Academy on Staten Island in the middle of her sophomore year. Before the world was under quarantine, Belle became an expert at it.
I would hang out with my friends all the time, but then I was neutropenic, so I couldn't do that. Like, even before Corona was a thing, I was quarantined for a while.
But TikTok kept Belle connected, not only to her friends, but to the rest of the world. She went viral on the social media app with this video. It has 1.3 million views. Belle finished chemo, and Wednesday is her last radiation session.
I'm in remission, which is crazy.
She made it through the biggest battle of her life and inspired so many along the way.
I've had people DM me and say, oh, what should I say to my friend that just got diagnosed?
As for Belle's future, it's looking brighter than ever. She's now headed for the next chapter.
Like, the first thing I thought of when I was diagnosed was, whoa, this is a good idea for my college essay. This is a good one. I'm going to go places with this one.
Belle is already on her way. On Staten Island, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
A 5-year-old in Tennessee is also alive and well after surviving a life-threatening condition in utero. a miracle birth credited to Father Michael McGivney, the founder of the Knights of Columbus, and one that could lead to his sainthood. Currents News' Jessica Easthope spoke with the parents.
That's the fluid. And that's 2.5 weeks later when he was healed.
Michelle Shackle and her husband Daniel have 13 children. Her youngest, Michael, is the reason why Father Michael McGivney, the founder of the Knights of Columbus, is one step closer to becoming a saint.
The whole journey with Michael has been the most beautiful, difficult journey of my life.
During Michelle's pregnancy with Michael, he was diagnosed with hydrops, a condition that causes fluid to build up in a baby's tissues and organs. Michelle's doctor said Michael wouldn't make it.
She said he has a very severe case and there is no hope. He will die.
Michelle was distraught. Having lost 5 children over the years, she was terrified Michael, who they were calling Ben at the time, would be stillborn like her first daughter. But she insisted on choosing life.
If the baby's not going to live, is this an abortion? And then I immediately thought, no, that would be an abortion. I could never do that. I love this baby and I'll fight for this baby.
In their darkest hours, Michelle and Daniel, who sells life insurance for the Knights of Columbus, turned to the order's founder, Father Michael McGivney.
Daniel said, I prayed to Father McGivney and I told him if he heals Michael, then we're naming him after him.
So they prayed and begged everyone they knew to do the same. A few weeks later, Michelle and Daniel went on a scheduled trip to Fatima. Scared the baby had died while they were away, Michelle rushed back to the doctors when she got home. That's when the unthinkable happened.
And I say, Doctor, I was told there's no hope. And then she looked at me and she said, oh, you're the woman that just came back from Fatima. And so that's when we changed his name that day.
Michelle was shocked. The hydrops was gone. Michael McGivney Shackle was born at 31 weeks with Down syndrome and a heart defect. But against all odds, he's thriving. He's now a healthy 5-year-old.
My miracle lives and breathes and smiles and says, Mommy.
Now, Father McGivney's beatification ceremony has been set for October 31st in Connecticut. Because Mikey was healed, the Shackles are forever connected to Father McGivney.
Father McGivney and I share a birthday. Michael's the youngest of 13 and Father McGivney's the oldest of 13. God wrote the whole story.
Father McGivney still needs one more miracle before he can be canonized. Michelle says all it takes is prayer, because God is still writing the story. Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
And that is Currents News. I'm Michelle Powers. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Be sure to tune in with Christine Persichetti every weeknight at 7. We leave you this weekend with Japan's solemn ceremony commemorating the thousands who died 75 years ago after the United States dropped atomic bombs on 2 cities. Today, Japan is still pushing for a world free of nuclear weapons, and we are all praying for peace.